Welcome to the deep dive. We dig into the sources, pull out the key insights, and basically hand you what you need to know. Today, we're jumping into the really remarkable story of Sam Zell, a man whose legacy is, well, it's a fascinating paradox. On one hand, you've got this massive fortune, something like, what, $5.2 billion, built on this almost uncanny instinct for timing markets. But then the other side of the coin, an $8.2 billion gamble that, well, it really defined things for a long time. He was famously known as the grave dancer.
Wow.
And his journey. It's just a masterclass in risk, resilience, and yeah, sometimes a pretty humbling collision with the market.
It really is fascinating, isn't it? When you look at Zell, you see this brilliant strategist, someone who could genuinely turn distressed assets, things nobody wanted, into these huge empires.
Yeah.
But then there's that dramatic moment, that turning point of fate you mentioned, all wrapped up in one single, pretty ill-fated deal. So our mission today really is to unpack that paradox. How could the very same instincts that brought him, unimaginable wealth, how could they also push him right to the brink? We want to get under the hood of that, understand the double-edged sword of that kind of conviction, and pull out some practical, maybe some aha moments that you can actually use no matter what field you're in.
The grave dancer. Yeah, it's more than just a cool nickname, isn't it? It really distills his whole philosophy. He wasn't just like participating in markets, he was dancing in them, finding opportunity where, frankly, everyone else just saw an economic graveyard. So we're not just looking at a business story here. We're digging into a mindset, a really unique financial compass that helped him navigate crises and build something extraordinary.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're going to journey through Zell's, let's call them hidden strategies, his very distinctive take on capital, how he thought about money, and the incredible systems he built, the engines behind his fortune. We'll look at the defining moments too, the big triumphs, definitely, that cemented his legend, but also that one significant misstep, which offered its own kind of wisdom. The goal here is to uncover those practical insights, things that resonate way beyond just real estate, and hopefully offer some clarity for your own decisions. 1. Zell's financial mindset, liquidity as the ultimate power.
Okay, let's start right at the foundation. Zell's financial mindset, because at its core was this principle he didn't just believe in, he lived it. Liquidity equals value. And that wasn't just some catchy slogan for him, was it? He saw it as a, quote, survival mechanism. Cash wasn't just capital, it was, well, ultimate power, the ability to control your own future when everyone else is basically forced to sell. What made that so powerful, especially in real estate?
Well, it was pretty revolutionary, honestly, because the real estate world traditionally, it runs on heavy leverage. I mean, huge amounts of debt. Most developers, they build using substantial debt. Zell, he kind of flipped that model on its head. He prioritized cash above everything else. He saw it as the ultimate power of choice. So in an industry that's often, dictated by whether you can get a loan and how much it costs, Zell's liquidity gave him this incredible optionality. It meant he could act and act decisively when other people were completely paralyzed. He could grab opportunities at, rock bottom prices exactly because he had the cash, the dry powder ready to go.
Yeah, and to really get that, you have to picture the scene, right? The late 80s, early 90s, the real estate market was, it was a bloodbath. Developers were just catastrophically over-leveraged. Banks were drowning in bad loans. Vacancy rates were soaring. It really felt like the sky was falling. And most players, they just disappeared. It was a brutal, brutal time.
Absolutely brutal. But this is where Zell's philosophy wasn't just some nice idea, it was a battle plan. His famous mantra, stay alive till 95. That wasn't just catchy. It was a strategic order. Hoard liquidity. He deliberately held back during those downturns. He waited patiently for what he graphically called blood in the streets. And that allowed him to swoop in by prime assets at, as he put it, cents on the dollar. It's a strategy that echoes even now. Moody's Analytics reported Q2 2025 U.S. office vacancy hit a record 20.7%. And your investors now talking about needing to survive till 25. It's the same idea. Zell's ghost is kind of whispering that cash isn't boring, it's weaponry, it's the ultimate tool for offense when everyone else is just scrambling to play defense.
Cash is weaponry. Wow, that really does reframe how you think about capital. And what's so fascinating is Zell wasn't just a master of buying low, he was maybe even more disciplined about selling high. His absolute masterclass in timing. February 2007. We're talking months, just months before the global financial crisis completely blew up. He sold equity office properties, his crown jewel, to Blackstone for an unbelievable $39 billion. At the time, it was the biggest leveraged buyout ever recorded. Just stunning timing.
The brilliance of that timing is, it's almost legendary. While everyone else, all his competitors, were still feasting on cheap debt, expanding their portfolios like there was no tomorrow. Zell did the exact opposite. He cashed out right at the absolute peak of the market. He personally pocketed something like $1 billion from just that one deal. And his reasoning was crystal clear. He saw pure liquidity, actual cash, as way more valuable than even his most amazing portfolio of skyscrapers. He didn't just react to the market shifting. He felt it coming. He read those subtle signals before pretty much anyone else.
That disciplined exit, zero sentimentality. It really highlights another one of his sort of paradoxical obsessions, opportunity over ownership. He famously said, and I think this just sums up so much, I don't fall in love with assets, I fall in love with opportunities. Such a simple statement, but wow, it speaks volumes.
Oh, the implication is profound. For Zell, buildings, they were just tools, a means to an end. Liquidity, though, that was the freedom to choose the next battlefield. And this emotional detachment, it was absolutely crucial. Because he refused to marry his assets, he could divorce them at the perfect moment, extract the maximum value, walk away richer, not burdened by nostalgia when the market signals inevitably turn. It gave him this almost, clinical cold advantage.
And, when you dig a bit deeper, there's actually a deep emotional root to this whole financial instinct. Zell's parents, they were Polish immigrants. They literally fled the Holocaust in 1939. Their survival depended entirely on mobility, on being able to just leave everything behind, start over fast. That experience, that kind of DNA of survival, it profoundly shaped his view. Liquidity meant never being trapped, never powerless. It was deeply personal for him, woven right into his business strategy.
And that personal history, it offers such a profound perspective, doesn't it? Most investors, they're laser focused on chasing returns, always looking for the next big win. But Zell, he chased something way more fundamental, resilience. He understood that when the economic tide inevitably goes out, leverage that powerful tool so many rely on, it becomes an anchor. It just weighs you down. Cash, on the other hand, is a lifeboat. And the person holding the lifeboat, they don't just survive, they get to dictate the rescue price for everyone else. So in a market where everyone feels this pressure to be fully invested, always chasing the next thing, Zell kind of whispers from history, liquidity isn't laziness, it's optionality. It's the right to say no today so you can say yes tomorrow on your terms, from a position of undeniable strength. 2, career strategy and wealth building, buying ugly, building empires.
That distinction, chasing returns versus chasing resilience, that's powerful. But how did he actually translate that into, building these empires? What did his core wealth building strategy look like on the ground? Because it definitely wasn't about building shiny new towers, right?
Well, far from it. Zell had this uncanny eye, really, for spotting value, where others just saw decay. Or even, ugliness. His core strategy was almost deceptively simple. Buy what others were literally running from, fix what was broken, optimize how it ran, and then just hold it long enough for the market to wake up and reprice those assets. That February 2007 sale of EOP to Blackstone for $39 billion, it wasn't just a brilliant exit, it was the ultimate proof of this whole strategy. For Zell, EOP wasn't some trophy to hang on to, it was inventory. Inventory that had hit its peak value. So he monetized it, grabbed about $1 billion personally, right before the financial crisis just obliterated office values. It perfectly shows his process. Build, optimize, then strategically sell when the market gives you a price you can't refuse.
But EOP, huge as it was, wasn't his only empire. And what often gets overlooked, and I think this is key to his genius, is his approach to system building. He didn't just collect buildings, he created this whole constellation of real estate investment trusts, REITs, that ended up dominating very specific corners of the market. It wasn't scattered buying, it was like strategic platform development.
You're absolutely right. His impact on how real estate is structured, how it's financed, is transformative. Let's just look at the scale and the focus of these things. First, you've got Equity Residential, EQR. That was his flagship residential REIT. By March 31st, 2024, EQR owned almost 80,000 apartments across the U.S. It's a major player, part of the S&P 500 index. It wasn't just a pile of apartments. It was this huge institutional-grade portfolio managed with real precision. Then there's Equity Lifestyle Properties, ELS. Now, this is a truly contrarian play. By early 2024, ELS managed 451 properties, over 172,000 home sites, mostly manufactured housing communities, RV parks. This was a niche Zell absolutely loved. Why? Because it had incredibly sticky demand. Tenants tended to stay put, and the very limited new supply coming online. He saw deep overlooked value where most people just saw, stigma. And finally, Equity Commonwealth, EQC. This was his post-crisis office REIT. EQC took this super cautious, almost defensive approach after 2014. They ended up holding over $2.2 billion in cash by mid-2024.
And instead of chasing deals that looked overpriced, in a really rare move for a public REIT, they decided to just return the capital straight to shareholders in 2025. That was a remarkable act of capital discipline, a testament to his belief that sometimes, the best investment is no investment at all.
Right. The strategy across all of these, it's incredibly clear. Zell wasn't trying to be everywhere at once. He picked very specific sectors where he knew he could build scale, use operational leverage effectively, and compound wealth using public market money. It almost felt like he was solving an engineering problem, not just buying and selling property.
It was exactly that. His philosophy really boiled down to this powerful mantra: don't buy what you can't fix. Don't fix what you can't scale. And this rigorous approach, it really set him apart from a lot of other real estate moguls at the time. For many of them, hoarding buildings was about status, right? Building a physical monument to their own success. But Zell, he saw properties as just puzzle pieces. If he couldn't clearly see how a specific asset fit into a bigger machine, a repeatable structure that could crank out cash flow and compound value, he just didn't touch it. That clarity, that purpose, allowed him to build these REIT platforms that weren't just portfolios. They were dynamic, self-sustaining financial engines.
And he never shied away from that pragmatism, did he? Zell once quipped, "I'm a businessman, I'm not an art collector." But to him, a building wasn't some masterpiece to admire or an heirloom to pass down. It was, quote, cash flow on concrete. And if the market was willing to overpay for that concrete, he'd happily sell it off. No nostalgia, just business.
And that's a huge takeaway for anyone trying to build wealth. True, lasting wealth, as Zell showed, it doesn't just come from collecting assets or chasing trends. It comes from engineering systems around assets. Zell wasn't just trading properties. He built repeatable, institutionalized structures, those public REITs, that basically captured his contrarian instincts. These systems were so robust they could survive leadership changes, market cycles, even his own death. They're still generating billions for investors today. And that's the beautiful paradox, isn't it? The guy nicknamed the Grave Dancer didn't just profit from dying assets. He created living, enduring structures that are still formidable forces in the market. His wealth building wasn't about being everywhere. It was about being strategically brilliant in the few places that really mattered. 3, habits and unique behaviors. The grave dancer mindset.
That's a great point about system building. Okay, let's dig into the personal habits, the unique behaviors that really forged this grave dancer mindset. Because this wasn't just a label someone else gave him. It was how he saw himself. He didn't call himself a developer or a landlord. He fully embraced the grave dancer. The nickname, he said, came from an essay he wrote way back in '76, republished in '84. He made his fortune not by building shiny new things, but literally dancing on the graves of distressed assets. Properties abandoned by over-leveraged owners, forgotten by most investors.
And this is far from some kind of morbid showmanship. It was highly disciplined opportunism. Zell's core belief was simple. Every market cycle, without fail, leaves casualties behind. And the investor who was willing to step into that mess, not recklessly, but with a clear strategy, with structure, that investor could reap extraordinary returns. It was about seeing the patterns in the chaos, not just the immediate pain.
A really striking example of this in action was back in the early '90s, right in the middle of the savings and loan crisis. American real estate was just gutted. Banks were desperate, scrambling to unload huge portfolios of distressed loans, half-finished buildings. Most investors, understandably, they ran for the hills, panicked. It felt like the floor had just fallen out of the economy.
But Zell, always the contrarian, he saw opportunity. Armed with all that liquidity he'd carefully hoarded, he pounced, bought these deeply discounted assets, meticulously restructured the debt, and turned them into efficient cash flow machines. By the mid-90s, as the market started to recover, those exact same assets, they turned into gold mines. It was textbook grave dancer strategy, showing that courage, backed by capital, can turn devastation into a fortune.
His philosophy, when you boil it down, it sounds almost simple, but it constantly broke with conventional wisdom. He lived by principles like, don't chase perfection, chase mispricing. Or, don't fear ugly assets, fear overpaying for pretty ones. And maybe most importantly, don't trust the crowd, trust the cycle. It's almost a complete flip of typical investment advice.
He often used that phrase, if everyone is going left, look right. And that wasn't just a catchy line for him. It was like the foundation of his whole empire. And we saw it play out again and again when other developers were rushing to build condos. He was quietly buying apartments. When investors were worshiping soaring office towers, he was strategically selling them off. And maybe the best example, when most of America basically turned its back on manufactured housing, calling them trailer parks, he was quietly building one of the biggest platforms in the country, Equity Lifestyle Properties. He consistently zigged when everyone else sagged. And that contrarian stance, it consistently paid off for him.
But this contrarianism, it wasn't just reckless or chaotic, right? It was actually supported by a very specific, almost meticulous set of habits, discipline habits. He didn't just blindly go against the grain. He did it with real purpose.
That's a crucial distinction, yeah. His boldness was always underpinned by rigorous habits. For instance, he read constantly, voraciously, scanning for signals way beyond just real estate, looking at politics, global trade, macroeconomics, everything. He deliberately kept his teams lean, and he actively encouraged blunt honesty. Famously say, if you agree with me all the time, I don't need you.
Yeah.
He wanted that challenge, that dissent, to sharpen his own thinking. And he obsessed over timing, treating exits with just as much skill and precision as he treated entries. This was someone who really understood the full life cycle of an investment, cradle to grave, so to speak.
There's also that emotional resonance to this grave dancer persona, which circles back to his roots again. Born to Jewish immigrants who fled the Holocaust, survival was basically etched into his family story. So for him, walking into chaos wasn't inherently scary. In a weird way, it was familiar. He kind of thrived in the ruins because he trusted that ruin was often temporary, just a phase in a bigger, predictable cycle.
And yet, that very mindset, the thing that made him a billionaire, it also carried this seed of risk, a kind of paradoxical blind spot. By leaning so hard into those contrarian bets, Zell sometimes, maybe, underestimated truly structural shifts in industries. We saw that later with the Tribune deal. The grave dancer could misjudge when an industry wasn't just wounded and ready for recovery, but actually terminal, facing irreversible decline. It highlights a really crucial nuance, I think. Zell's contrarianism worked wonders when an industry was just, wounded, temporarily down. But Tribune showed that even the grave dancer couldn't bring back the truly dead. It forces us to ask, right? For any investor, how do you tell the difference between a distressed asset and a terminal one? That ultimately is the challenge. 4, life philosophy and decision-making. The professional opportunist.
That's a really profound point. Distinguishing distressed from terminal. Let's dive deeper into his life philosophy, his decision-making, because it all seems to stem from how he saw himself. If you ask Sam Zell to describe himself, just one phrase, he wouldn't say real estate tycoon or billionaire investor. He'd pick something simpler, almost mischievous. I'm a professional opportunist.
And that wasn't just bravado. It was his absolute guiding philosophy. It influenced every single decision. Zell believed opportunities are genuinely everywhere, but most people miss them. Why? Because they're too rigid in their thinking or too distracted by what everyone else is doing or, frankly, just too afraid to act decisively. For him, the key was stay incredibly flexible, move fast, and design structures that let him seize those moments everyone else ignored. He was always ready to pivot, to capitalize on what others overlooked.
And a prime example of that was how fluid he was about asset classes. He really didn't fall in love with one type of property. He'd strategically jump between apartments, office buildings, manufactured housing, even emerging markets. There was no sacred cow in his portfolio. Totally asset class agnostic.
Common thread, though, regardless of the asset class, was always the asymmetry of risk and reward. He had this very clear mental model. If he could effectively cap the downside, if he knew the absolute maximum he could lose on a deal, then he was absolutely willing to test the upside, to see how much he could possibly gain. This pragmatic calculation allowed him to be incredibly bold, but crucially, never entirely reckless. It was a calculated kind of daring.
And that calculation, it seems, is exactly why he championed manufactured housing, a sector Wall Street famously just dismissed as trailer parks, largely ignored, totally unglamorous.
Precisely. But Zell, he saw profound resilience there, long-term value. He saw limited new supply. He saw steady cash flow. And critically, he saw those sticky tenants, people who tended to stay put for long stretches, creating stable demand. So while others scoffed, he quietly, systematically scaled up equity lifestyle properties, ELS, into this giant, managing 451 properties over 172,000 sites by early 2024. It wasn't flashy, but it was incredibly bulletproof, and it brilliantly proved his point. True wealth often comes from seeing value where others completely overlook it or even look down on it.
His decision-making environment was also pretty unique, wasn't it? Never about just getting everyone to agree. He actively cultivated teams that would challenge him, fostered this culture of blunt honesty. Sounds effective, but maybe intense.
Oh, famously intense. He had that legendary quote summing it up. If you agree with me all the time, I don't need you. No. In his view, conflict, robust debate, dissenting opinions that actually sharpened thinking, forced everyone to consider angles they might have missed. Conversely, he believed that forced consensus. He just dulled thinking. led to less innovative, less resilient decisions. He valued that intellectual sparring, saw it as a critical part of his due diligence process.
Okay, despite all that boldness, there was this deeply ingrained discipline too. Zell filtered opportunities with one critical test. Can I live with the downside? If the answer was no, he walked away. Simple as that. If yes, then he leaned in and leaned in hard. That sounds like a really powerful personal anchor.
That downside filter was absolutely crucial, and it directly contributed to his survival through multiple downturns, where lots of his peers just got wiped out by too much leverage, poor risk management. And yet, this same fearlessness, this embracing of risk when others fled, it also contained that paradoxical vulnerability. By trusting maybe too deeply in his own opportunism, he walked right into the Tribune deal, a situation where the downside, as it turned out, was emphatically not survivable. And this underscores a vital point, I think. Being an opportunist isn't about chasing every single thing that glitters. It's about mastering the art of saying no again and again until the right yes appears. Zell knew this most of the time, but as we'll get into, when he forgot, the market reminded him, and it did so brutally. 5, power and social influence. Architect of the REIT era.
That's a sobering reminder, yeah. Even the best strategies hit unexpected walls. But let's shift focus a bit to Zell's broader influence, because his power went way beyond just his personal bank account. His true power, I'd argue, came from actually shaping the rules of the game itself. By the time he passed, industry leaders, NAREIT, the National Association for REITs, they hailed him as nothing less than the architect of the modern REIT era. What does that actually mean for the finance world?
It's a huge designation. Monumental, really. It means Zell didn't just buy and sell buildings like everyone else. He fundamentally institutionalized a whole new way of turning real estate into a scalable, liquid, publicly traded business. He was one of the very first to really grasp that the REIT structure, which was once kind of niche, almost obscure, had the potential to be a financial powerhouse, if managed with the kind of discipline and vision he brought. And he didn't just talk about it. He built the platforms to prove it. Turned that theory into a multi-billion-dollar reality that completely transformed how capital flows into property markets.
And these platforms became absolute giants. Still relevant, still powerful today, long after he's gone. That's a testament to the structures he built, right?
Absolutely. Let's just quickly revisit their influence and scale again. Equity Residential, EQR, his flagship residential REIT. By March 31st, 2024, almost 80,000 apartments. A mainstay of the S&P 500. It's a cornerstone of modern investing. Equity Lifestyle Properties, ELS, the manufactured housing giant. Early 2024, 451 properties, over 172,000 home sites, powerfully demonstrating the resilience, the unexpected strength of a sector once dismissed by traditional investors. And then Equity Commonwealth, EQC. After years of super cautious management post-2014, sitting on over $2.2 billion in cash by mid-2024, EQC ultimately dissolved in April 2025. Distributed a remarkable $20.60 per share back to investors. This is just a bold, almost revolutionary lesson in capital discipline, knowing when to just stop and return capital instead of chasing growth just for growth's sake. So through these platforms, Zell effectively taught Wall Street that real estate could be more than just bricks and mortar. It could be a sophisticated institutional asset class with strong governance, real liquidity, transparency.
His fingerprints are truly all over how pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, even everyday retail investors now access and understand property markets. He made a once opaque asset class much more accessible.
But his power, his influence, it wasn't just confined to balance sheets or financial structures, was it? Zell was also a pretty significant cultural force. At the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business, for example, he endowed programs that nurtured, trained generations of entrepreneurs, instilled his unique mindset in them. His blunt, often unfiltered advice became kind of legendary, almost folklore among students, aspiring business leaders.
Indeed. He challenged young founders with these unapologetic lines like, "Conventional wisdom is not wisdom, it's just convention." Really pushed them to think critically, independently. That kind of directness resonated deeply. And beyond the financial and educational influence, there was his philanthropy too. With his wife Helen, Zell supported a wide range of causes: education, the arts, Jewish organizations, from a $10 million gift to Michigan Ross's Zell-Lurie Institute for Entrepreneurial Studies to backing the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. His influence really did extend far beyond just finance, left a mark on culture, community.
And yet, there's always that duality, isn't there? The same guy who brilliantly engineered these wealth systems created these enduring institutions. For many people, he's also remembered for the Tribune fiasco.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful contrast.
It is. And, that's what makes his story so compelling, I think. That balance of triumph and failure, that stark reminder that even the architects of entire industries can misjudge their blueprints sometimes. It made him incredibly human. And paradoxically, it makes his lessons endure even more powerfully. The deeper takeaway, maybe, is this. True power doesn't ultimately come from owning the most stuff or having the biggest empire. It comes from designing frameworks, systems, institutions that genuinely outlive you. Sam Zell's REIT empire wasn't just about his name on a building. It was about creating these financial vehicles that continue to channel billions, generate value years after he's gone. That's not just influence. That's permanence. 6. Crisis and long-term play. The 8.2B Tribune collapse and the discipline of exit.
And that brings us perfectly to the other side of that duality, the crisis. The $8.2 billion Tribune Company collapse. This was, arguably, the darkest chapter in Sam Zell's whole storied career. He closed the leveraged buyout of Tribune on December 20th, 2007. Personally, put in a staggering $315 million of his own money. It must have felt like a crowning achievement at that moment.
The timing, though, in hindsight,
Yeah.
catastrophic. Within just 1 year, the global financial crisis exploded. Ad revenues for traditional media just collapsed.
Yeah.
And on December 8th, 2008, Tribune filed for bankruptcy, making it the largest media bankruptcy in U.S. history. Zell himself later called it the deal from hell. For a man who built his empire, dancing on the graves of others' failures, this time, well, he found himself standing right in one. The brutal lesson here was that even his powerful contrarian instincts, his uncanny knack for spotting distressed assets, couldn't reverse a truly structural decline. Tribune wasn't just cyclical, it was an industry and terminal disruption. Print media eroding irreversibly under the relentless rise of digital. He fundamentally misjudged the nature of the grave he was trying to dance on that time.
Yeah, the Tribune collapse undeniably scarred his reputation. Critics jumped on it, saying the grave dancer had finally misjudged a grave too deep to resurrect. And for a while, that really seemed to be the defining narrative around him.
And yet, what's truly remarkable isn't the failure itself. I mean, every big investor has one, often many. What's remarkable is what came after. Zell did not double down to save face. He didn't throw good money after bad, trying to salvage his pride. He absorbed the massive loss. He publicly acknowledged the mistake. And then he pivoted. He showed a humility, a discipline that, frankly, few billionaires manage, turning the page instead of clinging desperately to a losing bet.
And this humility, this kind of newfound discipline, it became vividly clear in his later vehicle, Equity Commonwealth, EQC, which you mentioned earlier. After taking control in 2014, Zell and his team made a very conscious call. They refused to chase overpriced deals in a really hot market, even as their peers were scrambling to deploy capital.
Their strategy with EQC was actually pretty radical for the real estate world. They systematically sold off billions in existing assets, and instead of reinvesting that cash, they aggressively hoarded it. Sat on an astounding $2.2 billion in liquidity by June 2024. Then, in a move almost unheard of in an industry famous for empire building at all costs, EQC decided to return that capital directly to shareholders, instead of reinvesting it at what they saw as poor yields. By April 22, 2025, EQC officially dissolved, distributed a total of $20.60 per share back to its investors. This is just a profound statement. Sometimes the most powerful play isn't to buy more, it's to stop, to say no, to exit with dignity rather than blindly chasing growth just for growth's sake. It was a masterclass in disciplined capital return.
That presents such a powerful paradox, doesn't it? The same guy who risked everything on that doomed Tribune bet also proved, years later, that restraint isn't just an option, it's a powerful, intelligent strategy, especially when markets get frothy.
It absolutely does. Emotionally, the Tribune saga reveals this deeply human side of Zell. For decades, he'd been this almost mythic figure, right? This fearless contrarian who always seemed to get the timing perfectly right. Tribune showed the world, and maybe even showed himself, that even legends bleed. But his response, shifting to that much more cautious, disciplined endgame with EQC, that showed his true genius. It wasn't just about making billions anymore. It was about strategically protecting them. And most critically, knowing precisely when the game itself had fundamentally changed. It really illustrates that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the tuition you pay for wisdom. And in Sam Zell's case, that very, very expensive wisdom became the compass for his final, masterful act, leaving the stage not with another audacious acquisition, but with a masterclass in disciplined exits. Lessons and wrap-up. the countercycle compass.
So as we wrap this up, Sam Zell's $5.2 billion fortune and that infamous $8.2 billion Tribune collapse. They really aren't opposites, are they? They are, in fact, two sides of the very same coin, both born from the exact same philosophy. Move where others won't dare. See opportunity where others only see risk or ruin. It's the story of a man who lived, and maybe died, by his unique countercycle compass.
And that countercycle compass, it really distills Zell's life principles into actionable insights for any of us, navigating markets or just life challenges. First, liquidity before ambition. Because cash doesn't just buy assets, it buys time, it buys optionality, it buys the power to dictate your own terms. Second, structures over stories. Because robust systems, repeatable processes, enduring frameworks, they will always outlast fleeting sentiment or even individual genius. Third, exits as important as entries. Because selling well, with discipline, with impeccable timing is just as powerful, maybe more powerful than buying right in the first place. And maybe above all, the humility to admit when the game has fundamentally changed and the courage to actually stop playing it.
He was never a saint, that's for sure. He was blunt, often abrasive, unapologetically opportunistic. But maybe that's exactly what made him such a clear mirror of the cycles he mastered. Bright and aggressive in the boom, ruthless and decisive in the bust. His legacy carries both incredible triumph and, profound tragedy, reminding us that even billionaires can bleed when conviction crashes into an unstoppable disruption.
And that's the enduring paradox, isn't it? The same instincts that build these colossal empires can, at other times, also undo them. And true wisdom, it lies not in avoiding failure entirely, because who can do that?
Sure.
But in learning where not to dance, knowing when an opportunity is truly dead, not just temporarily distressed, understanding the nuances of the cycle.
So for anyone out there navigating the complexities of business, investing, or even just the big decisions in your personal life, Zell's compass, it still points true. Dare to go against the crowd, absolutely, but also have the wisdom to know when the crowd, just maybe for once, might be right. Build with discipline, sell with impeccable timing, and never, ever forget that resilience, not perfection, is the ultimate enduring edge.
And perhaps that's precisely why Sam Zell remains so unforgettable. Because behind the staggering $5.2 billion fortune and behind the equally legendary $8.2 billion downfall lies something far rarer. A life lived entirely, completely on his own terms, with lessons that will absolutely outlast even the tallest towers he ever owned. His story is really a testament to conviction, but conviction tempered by hard-won wisdom. Outro.
Ultimately, Sam Zell's story, it isn't just about wealth. It's not even just about risk. Fundamentally, it's about choice. The profound choice to hold cash when the entire world is screaming, buy. The difficult choice to sell at the absolute market peak when your own pride is whispering, hold on, you're on top. And the humbling choice to admit defeat when the market proves to be stronger than even your deepest conviction.
So let me ask you, listening right now, when the cycle inevitably turns again, when fear and greed collide, as they always do, what will your choice be? Will you instinctively just follow the crowd? Or will you have the clarity, the courage to trust your own compass, guided maybe by the lessons of a true grave dancer?
Because in the end, this isn't just Sam Zell's story. It's really a mirror held up to all of us, asking, when the next graveyard of opportunities appears, will you have the courage to dance or the discipline to walk away?